Hello, music appreciation students, and welcome to Chapter 2, the medieval period. Today we're going to take a really quick look at the first part of the medieval period in music. This is going to mainly focus on the sacred music of the time. The medieval period, we basically think of the medieval period as lasting between about 476, I know it's kind of hard to read that there, to around the year 1400. There can be some leeway on there as well. Remember, all these dates are kind of give and take, right? There's no hard, fast rule that this is the definite date for anything. It's just when we see enough artistic changes. So, what's going on in the world? The world's a really interesting place during this time. So, around 476, we get the fall of the Roman Empire, and this is huge in the history of Western music and the history of Western culture. Rome basically took over all the power from the Greeks, right? And the Romans established, a massive empire across all of Europe, and there's Roman civilizations all the way from Scotland down into Egypt. I mean, Rome was just everywhere. So it was really an amazing accomplishment that these people created in making a society. So when Rome fell, we used to think that it was kind of like the world went crazy and everything brilliant stopped, and that's why we had this, like the Dark Ages and all of that. But thankfully, we're starting to learn that's just really not the case, that, people persevered. But there was a bit of a power vacuum, and that power vacuum was eventually taken over, fulfilled by the Roman Catholic Church. See what they did there? That was pretty smooth. So around the year 600, Pope Gregory is one of our big players, and he kind of creates what we call the Catholic Mass. If you're Catholic today, you're very familiar with the Mass. So the Catholic Church fills the role of that was left by the fall of the Roman Empire. And so basically the Church assigns rulers, and everybody pays homage to the Church. So the Church becomes immensely powerful. So you may be the king of a country or whatever it is, but you're still answering to the Roman Catholic Church. 750, Beowulf is written, if you've had to read that book. 768, Charlemagne begins his reign. He's our first Holy Roman Emperor. Musically, polyphony comes onto the scene in 900. We'll talk about polyphony a little bit. I love this, the First Crusades. If you're that was a horribly drawn line, but if you're a big fan of, Knights of the Round Table and those sorts of things, that's Crusades time. Let's see. Music rhythmic notation comes around 1270. Robin Hood, if you're a big Robin Hood fan, he's here at 1247. And then, of course, everybody's favorite thing, the bubonic plague, 1347. Not a good time to be alive in Europe. So there you go. That's what's going on around the world. So the New World, big air quotes, has not been, quote unquote, discovered by Europeans. Already touched on this a little bit, but Rome falls on September 4th, 476. And big air quotes around the word savages. And basically that's because when the Roman power scheme fell, it did leave room for other people to come in and either take over by brute force, or, as we're starting to discover more accurately, just kind of came in, commingled, and changed societies. So it wasn't this bloodbath of stupidity that historically scholars have tried to make it out to. Current scholarship shows that it was far less of a barbaric time. But as I said, Christianity rises to power because it becomes the unifying force all across Europe. And it is no coincidence that power rises out of Rome again, because people were comfortable with Rome. Rome existed as the leader of an empire, so a church out of Rome then also becomes it. Okay? Scooching on over here. Oh my gosh, these are really hard to read. I hope that these are a little bit clearer to read when you're online. But the Catholic Church, it employed most professional musicians. To ignore, the music of church. because some people will say, why do we talk so much about, sacred music? And that's because really for the history of music as we know it, it's been a sacred thing. The church has played such a pivotal role in the creation of music. So the Catholic Church was very powerful, it was very wealthy, so they could afford to hire musicians and to train musicians. So most of the music that we think of as academic and that has shaped and affected the world at large was a product of the Roman Catholic Church coming out of monasteries and abbeys. And very little development actually happens in music for roughly 1,000 years because the church is going to be very conservative in their approach to music and in their approach to music creation. So they aren't going to be willing to jump onto the next big trend in music, as it were. So they're going to make sure that the music that is written for the church follows certain parameters, certain rules, because they don't want anything to potentially take power away from the church. So they're going to be very strict in how they handle music. So one of the big forms of music that comes out of this time is Gregorian chant, named after Pope Gregory. And it's named after Pope Gregory because that's when it became very stylistically appropriate, was during his reign as Pope. But he did not compose this music, so please don't confuse that fact. Pope Gregory did not compose any of this music. It was composed by people in the Catholic Church under his jurisdiction, okay? And it was the style that he approved. So what makes Gregorian chant? Simply an unaccompanied vocal line, okay? So it is the actual texture. We haven't learned about textures yet. Textures is coming up, but I'm going to go ahead and use a fancy pants texture word. So today's texture word is I'm going to write it up here. I hope you can see it. Is monophonic. Okay? So mono is our root word, meaning one, phonic meaning sound. So one sound. That does not mean, nor should it be confused with, a soloist, okay? Monophonic means one sound. So that means if it's one person singing a melodic line, yes, that is monophonic. But if it is a group of us singing a melodic line, a line of melody, like if I always equate it to happy birthday. If we were all say, hey, let's sing happy birthday to Joe. My clock's ticking, so excuse me if you can hear that in the background. But if we were to all sing happy birthday to Joe, theoretically, we're singing monophonic because we are all singing the exact same song at the exact same time. The difference would come in if there was a harmonic line with it. Okay, so that's what you have to bear in mind. All right, so monophonic music means just one sound. Okay, one group of people singing or one solo vocalist, everybody singing the exact same thing. Okay. And this music was made for the Mass, okay? So there were sung parts of the Mass, and it was a very important part of the Mass, and there were different components to the Mass that we will also talk about. The musical style, the rhythm on Gregorian chant, there's no regular pulsations of beat, okay? So everything we learned about in the rhythm section, where, it's like steady beats and all that, does not apply here. It will not apply until we get to the late Renaissance, and better said, the Baroque. That's when beat becomes a big thing. In the medieval period, we're dealing much more with how would people have spoken? How would this have been said? So the meter is much more imitative of spoken word than sung. Okay, but we do get something really interesting in the terms of syllabic versus melismatic writing, which is down here. So syllabic writing would be like every syllable has a pitch. So it'd be like, hello class, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Okay, that would be syllabic. Melismatic would be many notes on the same syllable. Think about like 90s powerhouses, Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston out on stage, and they're just hand up in the air singing one syllable, but they're all over the place. Christina Aguilera likes to do it too. What's her name with the ponytail? Ariana Grande. It kind of drives me nuts because they do it too much. But melismatic would be like if we took that same idea that I just did, but instead of hello class, how are you? I would go Hello, class. How are you? Lots of notes on single syllables. That's melismatic writing. And then we had our responsorial, which is to be repeated. And there would also be antiphonal, which is we all sing together. Okay? All right, now, going modal. I love this title because this is all about major and minor didn't exist. It's all about the modes. So there were 6 church modes. And those church modes were originally developed by the ancient Greeks. We've already learned that. But they were used in the church. You know, the church has kind of adopted them from the secular practices or the pagan practices of the Greeks and took them into their fold. So the modes are Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. Locrian here, and now you notice I actually named off 7, not 6. I always include Locrian, even though this is a theoretical mode. They wouldn't have recognized it. They just used the first 6. And we still use modes today. And if you do it like a quick little Google search or a search on YouTube of songs in modes, you will find some really good videos that demonstrate different people that use modes. It tends to be much more experimental singers. Like Bjork has some songs that she's written in the Dorian mode. So if you're a Bjork fan, you can listen to some Bjork in Dorian mode. But it's really fascinating. If you're a big fan of folk music, like I love me some, oh my gosh, Simon and Garfunkel. Their name just left me. But you listen to their version of Scarborough Fair. That's in the Dorian mode. It's great. It's good stuff. All right. This next slide here had a video embedded in it. So make sure you watch the video. When I'm in this presentation thing, it won't upload the videos. But listen to some Gregorian chant in action on this one. Now, I'm going to go ahead and stop here. This is music outside of the church when we start talking about secular music. We're about 12 minutes in, so I think I'm going to stop the video right here, and we'll pick up with outside of the church. All right? Good work. Bye.